Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're tackling just one source document, but it's intense.
Yeah, definitely. It's an article called The Cement Holocaust of the 21st Century.
And the source itself, it actually calls its own analysis angry and scientific.
And it frames everything through this theory it calls Odam Tili.
Right. Now, the absolute core of this piece is its focus on a really, truly disturbing video.
Yeah, this video, it reportedly shows a kindergarten in Bухаре.
And it's being demolished by bulldozers.
With, and this is the key part the source highlights, with children and educators apparently still inside.
It's hard to even process that. And the source anticipates this, talking about the reaction you, the viewer, might have.
It lays out possibilities. Horror, maybe just being struck mute, despair.
Or, and this is crucial to the source's argument, maybe, nothing.
Exactly. And the source claims, pretty starkly, that if your reaction is nothing, then, quote, the system's experiment on you has already succeeded.
Wow. So, right from the start, the source isn't hedging. It gives its interpretation immediately.
No, it's very clear. This is not a tragedy, it insists.
It calls it a crime.
A crime. And not just like a random terrible event, but something systemic.
Systemic and civilizational. Those are big words.
Huge. So that's our goal for this deep dive, really, to unpack this specific article.
We want to explore its claims, understand the analysis it offers through this Odam Tili idea.
And look at what the source thinks this awful event reveals about, well, society, power, things like that.
And we need to be super clear here. We're sticking strictly to reporting what this source says.
Absolutely. We're exploring its perspective, its arguments. We're not here to agree or disagree.
Just to understand and convey what's in this document. Okay, so let's get into how the source starts to break this down.
Well, it looks at that video, the Bухaре kindergarten video, and it argues this reveals a new kind of fascism.
A new fascism. How does it define that?
It contrasts it with, the old imagery. It says this kind doesn't shout hail or things like that.
Okay.
Instead, the fascism it sees is in the cold-blooded calculation, the act of launching a bulldozer, knowing kids are inside.
And the source really zooms in on the details it picks out from the event or the reporting of it.
Yeah, things like no trial beforehand, no official warning given, apparently no specific person's name attached to the order.
Just the act itself.
Right, just the camera rolling, the fear that must have been there, and what the source calls demonstrative dehumanization.
Like the system itself is performing, making a point.
Exactly. Which leads the source to kind of search for the right words, the right language to describe what it's seeing.
What terms does it use?
It lands on state sadism.
State sadism, that's strong.
Very. It also calls it a new gulag, but without the obvious barbed wire fences.
So a psychological gulag?
Kind of.
Yeah.
And underneath it all, the source argues there's this cynical message being sent to everyone watching, to society.
And that message is?
You are nobody.
Oof. And this feels like where the source gets really direct, almost like it's speaking right to you, the listener or reader.
Yeah, it basically says, look, it doesn't matter if you're a child or an educator, even inside a nursery.
You can still be destroyed.
Right. And worse, the implication is no one will step in. No one will save you. No one will even try to intervene.
Which naturally leads to the question the source has to ask, why? How is something like this even possible?
And the source has a specific theory on this, particularly focused on former Soviet republics.
Okay, what's the argument?
It argues that the post-Soviet elite, the people in power, inherited what it calls the language of the colony.
The language of the colony. What does that mean in this context?
It means, according to the source, they essentially stopped seeing the general population as actual people.
So, like, they're detached, they're abstracted.
Completely. So focused on, plans, targets, control, that they literally can't perceive the human cost.
The source says they can't hear the crying.
Exactly. They don't feel the pain. They don't recognize, as the source puts it, that a child isn't just a statistic or, a roadblock for a construction project.
A fundamental disconnect from shared humanity?
That's what the source is arguing. It contends this elite was sort of shaped by and operates on one core principle.
Which is?
The people were not created to live, but to be silent.
Wow. That's a bleak assessment of power dynamics.
It really is. And then the source takes another turn, one that's maybe a bit unexpected.
Okay.
It insists this whole horrific event, the demolition, it's not fundamentally about the concrete or the building.
It's not. Then what is it about, according to the source?
It claims it's about something deeper, more insidious. It calls it a genocide of thinking.
Genocide of thinking, how does that work?
It's arguing for a kind of violence that isn't necessarily physical, not about blood.
Okay.
It's about silence. But not just like passive silence. A silence that becomes active policy.
A weaponized silence.
Sort of. Allowing fear, the source argues, to just completely replace genuine human language, real connection.
And the source really pushes back against minimizing interpretations, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It directly asks the reader, are you still thinking this was just a mistake?
And its answer is?
A definitive no. It explicitly states, quote, this is a conscious program of unlearning empathy.
A program to teach people not to feel empathy.
That's the claim. The source even suggests the video itself, its circulation, was maybe a kind of test.
A test of what?
A test of dehumanization run on a mass scale.
Mm-hmm.
Could people watch an excavator hovering over children on a screen?
And remain indifferent.
Right. Could they just keep scrolling through their social media feed unaffected?
And if the answer is yes,
then the source argues, we have been raised as colonial subjects, not as citizens. That experiment we mentioned earlier. It worked.
So where does the source point the finger? Who's responsible for this state of affairs?
Well, it acknowledges the obvious. Yes, the people actually operating the machinery, they're part of it.
But they're not the main focus.
No. According to this article, the main culprits are, basically everyone who has accepted this language of indifference, accepted it as normal.
Everyone who stays silent.
Or worse, everyone who finds themselves thinking or saying things like,
like what?
Like, oh, there was probably a reason, or, well, it's none of my business. Or that really common one.
The system is just too strong. What can you do?
Exactly. The source has a very, very direct response to that kind of thinking.
I have a feeling it's not gentle.
Not at all. The claim is incredibly stark. It basically says, if you think that, here you are that system.
Wow. So your passivity isn't neutral.
Far from it. The source says, your silence is its gasoline. Your apathy is its armor.
So it's an active contribution to the problem in this view.
That's precisely the argument.
Yeah.
Okay, so given this incredibly bleak analysis, does the source offer any way out? Any hope?
It must propose something, right?
It does. It claims the only solution lies in returning to what it calls the language of humans.
And this connects back to that Odam Tili theory mentioned at the start.
Exactly. This is where it comes back in. The source argues the catastrophe isn't really legal. Or political, even.
It's semantic.
Semantic, ethical, existential, that's the idea.
What does that mean practically? Losing the meaning of words.
Sort of, yeah. The source seems to argue we've lost the fundamental weight, the real meaning, behind basic human concepts in our everyday language.
Right.
Like, we've lost the language where the word child truly, deeply signifies life. Irreducible value.
Okay.
Or where educator isn't just a job title, but means a respected person protecting that life.
And a kindergarten
Isn't just some piece of property you can knock down, but a place imbued with human value, a place that should be fundamentally immune from a tractor blade.
So the problem is a decay in the meaning embedded in our language.
That's the core diagnosis. And the source states very emphatically that only this Odam Tili theory offers a way to restore that lost meaning.
Restore rationality, morality, empathy.
Correct. It explicitly says this isn't philosophy. This is an antidote against programmed indifference.
An antidote. It sees it as medicine for a sick society.
Precisely. And it concludes with some really powerful warnings, building on that central concrete metaphor.
What does it say?
It warns, either we become people or we remain material for concrete.
Become people or become building material. That's stark.
And it drives it home, saying, today they rolled children into concrete, tomorrow they will roll you into concrete.
A direct threat or warning to the reader.
Absolutely. And its final, really chilling point ties it all together.
Which is?
That if this linguistic illness, which it identifies as post-Soviet fascism, if that isn't rolled into concrete, meaning, destroyed, eradicated,
then
it will ultimately succeed in erasing the very concept of humanity itself.
Wow. Okay. So let's just recap what we've unpacked from this source, the cement holocaust of the 21st century.
We've seen its incredibly intense interpretation of that Bухaре video, seeing it not as a mere tragedy, but as a systemic civilizational crime, a new fascism.
We looked at its analysis of the motivations behind what it terms the post-Soviet elites, arguing they operate with a language of the colony.
And its argument that this represents something deeper, a genocide of thinking, a deliberate program of unlearning empathy.
Right. And it's really strong condemnation of societal apathy and silence, going so far as claiming silence is actually fuel for the system it describes.
And finally, its proposed solution, framed through this Odam Tili theory, presented as a vital antidote to what it calls programmed indifference.
So as we stressed earlier, this deep dive has really just focused on laying out the arguments, the specific viewpoints presented within this single powerful source, giving you a window into its perspective.
Exactly. We haven't been endorsing it, just exploring it.
So why spend time digging into a source like this, one with such a strong, specific, and frankly provocative viewpoint?
Well, maybe it's valuable just to see how some sources choose to analyze power structures, how they assign responsibility across society.
And how they use really intense language to try and make their point, to shake the reader.
Yeah, or maybe it's about thinking through the source's core claims about silence and indifference. Thinking about the impact of those things, even if you don't agree with the source's whole framework or its conclusions.
It definitely forces you to confront uncomfortable ideas.
It does. And remember, this source argues that really fundamental concepts, like child or humanity, can actually lose their meaning in society.
And it gives that stark warning about the personal cost, suggesting you could become material for concrete if this linguistic illness, as it calls it, isn't dealt with.
It really challenges that idea that your silence is neutral. It claims your silence is gasoline for the very system it opposes.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with, drawn directly from this source's perspective. What does that idea that your silence could be fuel make you consider about what this source sees as the potential cost of widespread indifference?